Between the years 1800 and 1850, a unique breed of around 20,000 individuals known as mountain men journeyed deep into the wild heart of America. They confronted merciless winters, the gnawing emptiness of starvation, and life-threatening situations armed with little more than an axe, a firearm, and a powerful inner resolve. These figures mastered some of the most unforgiving terrain on the continent, relying on a set of survival abilities that have since faded from common knowledge. Using only their own hands and rudimentary implements, they could transform a dense forest into a durable sanctuary that would last for generations. Allow yourself to imagine what it truly meant to construct a shelter from the raw elements in that untamed world. Before we drift into that time, a gentle request. If you find solace in these historical journeys, a simple like or subscribe is always appreciated. It's always a quiet wonder to know where these stories are being heard. So feel free to comment with your city and the time of night. It's a curious thought that some of you might be enjoying a morning meal in London as this narrative is being recorded in the quiet of the American night. Let us journey back together to the frontier of the 1830s. First, allow yourself to find complete comfort. It is important. Adjust your pillows, pull your blanket a little closer. This is a story that invites you to settle in and listen as your eyes gently close into darkness. This is not the familiar darkness of a modern bedroom, filtered by the distant glow of city lights. Instead, you are enveloped by a profound, absolute blackness that seems to consume everything. Picture a bitter morning in October of 1834, in a place that would one day be called Montana. For now, it is simply an immense wilderness, a sprawling tapestry of mountains and trees governed by the single law of survival. Feel the unyielding earth beneath you, its surface turned to iron by the deep chill of the night. A deep soreness radiates through every muscle, a testament to the unforgiving bed. There is no soft mattress here, only a sparse collection of evergreen branches offering a fragile barrier against the planet's frozen heart. Notice how the woolen covering over you has become rigid with ice crystals, and with every exhale, a plume of vapor materializes in the dim, nascent light. The fire so carefully constructed the previous evening has dwindled to mere glowing embers. Your hands protest with new blisters as you slowly push yourself to a sitting position. The storm that has been gathering for days is now drawing near. Ominous clouds crown the far-off peaks, and the breeze carries the distinct, sharp promise of snow. You have spent enough time in this high country to understand these portents. This will be no ordinary storm. It is the kind of weather system that claims the lives of those who are not ready. Two paths lie before you. You can either build a shelter before the sun sets or surrender to the freezing elements within the week. A fact that many people might not grasp, discovered in a forgotten journal within a historical archive, is that a man in this era had a window of perhaps 12 hours to erect a basic cabin after deciding winter had arrived. It was a 12-hour race between continuing to live and succumbing to death. This particular journal was the property of a fur trapper, Jeremiah Winters, who navigated these same mountains in the 1830s. He chronicled the time he built a cabin using only an axe hewn to a razor's edge, hands as tough as old leather, and the stark realization that failure was fatal. His story is so compelling because it illuminates the incredible depth of proficiency these men possessed. This process was far more than casually stacking logs. You feel the ache of yesterday's work in every fiber of your being as you stretch. The last 3 days were spent in careful reconnaissance for the ideal building site, a search that finally bore fruit yesterday. You found it. A modest clearing on a gentle south-facing incline, close to a spring that would resist even the most severe winter freeze. A dense stand of pine trees to the north provides a natural shield against the wind. From this vantage point, the terrain allows you to see any approach from a great distance. None of these factors were accidental. Every choice becomes critical when your very existence hangs in the balance. Let me help you visualize the scene you are facing. Majestic pines create a perimeter around you, their trunks a full 3 feet in diameter, soaring 100 feet toward the heavens. The ground of the forest is a complex weave of downed trees, stones, and thick vegetation. To the uninitiated, it appears as chaos. To a mountain man, it is a storehouse of resources. Everything essential for survival is present, waiting for a knowing hand to put it to use. You reach for your possibles bag, a deerskin satchel holding the keys to your existence. Flint and steel, a knife, a whetstone, a few pieces of dried meat, and a small pouch of salt. Your long rifle rests against a nearby tree, and your axe, a finely crafted instrument with a head forged in the distant city of St. Louis, is still embedded in the stump where you left it. It's fascinating to know that one of these original axes, held in a Wyoming museum, was described by the curator as being more than a simple tool. In this environment, it represented the very value of a man's life. A frontiersman would sooner share his bedroll with his axe than take the chance of it being stolen. The first hint of daylight struggles to pierce the dense canopy as you carefully revive the embers of your fire with dry, shredded cedar bark from your bag. You breathe on them gently, patiently nurturing the sparks into a small flame. Soon, the fire is large enough to warm your chilled hands and to heat a simple meal of jerky and the last of your ground corn mixed with water. The most incredible thing about these men is that this was not a temporary excursion. This was their Tuesday. They endured this life for years on end, utterly isolated in the vast wilderness. Can you let your mind wander to the idea of passing months without any human contact? I find myself growing restless if my internet connection fails for a single hour. Once your morning meal is finished, You take up your axe and walk to the boundary of the clearing. Today is the day it all begins. You have already selected several straight lodgepole pine trees, the perfect choice for the walls of a cabin. Their straight grain and inherent resistance to decay make them the supreme building material. An old mountain man's wisdom, shared with a journalist in 1872, offers the first principle of cabin construction. Choose your trees as you would choose a partner in life, straight, strong, and capable of enduring any storm. You stand before the first tree, its diameter roughly 14 inches, its height stretching nearly 100 feet. With a deep inhalation, you begin to swing the axe, feeling the deep, satisfying thud as the sharpened steel bites into the wood. Chips of timber fly as you carve a notch into one side, carefully aiming it in the direction you wish the tree to fall. Your arms are already beginning to burn with the exertion, but you persist. There is no time for rest with the imminent arrival of winter. Every single swing of the axe is thoughtful and precise. You are not merely hacking at a tree. You are in a dialogue with it, interpreting its posture, its equilibrium, and anticipating its trajectory. Let's pause for a moment to truly appreciate this scene. You are completely by yourself in this immense, silent wilderness. Should this tree fall incorrectly, should it recoil or land somewhere other than intended, there is no one to come to your aid. There is no emergency service to call, no hospital for 1,000 miles. A single error would make you just another forgotten victim of the frontier. I once consulted a survival expert specializing in historical wilderness skills. He shared a remarkable insight with me. These men cultivated a kind of sixth sense regarding trees. They could interpret the subtle cues of a tree's potential fall, from the weight distribution of its branches to the twist of its grain and the influence of the wind. Their skill was not just about raw power. It was about a profound, intimate connection with the materials of their world. The notch you are cutting deepens until it penetrates a third of the trunk's diameter. You then shift to the opposite side and begin a second cut, positioned slightly higher than the first. This method, originally learned from native tribes and honed over generations, ensures a controlled and predictable fall. After a final sequence of forceful swings, you hear it. It is the unmistakable cracking sound that announces the tree is starting to yield. You retreat swiftly, your gaze locked on the treetop as it sways, pauses for a moment, and then succumbs to gravity's pull. The sound of its descent reverberates through the forest as 100 feet of pine crashes to the earth, startling birds into flight from the surrounding canopy. The impact creates a tremor under your feet, and the clean, sharp scent of pine fills the air. That is one tree down. You will need to fell at least 20 more before the day is through. Your body is crying out for a break, but the clouds on the horizon are gathering and turning darker. You can almost sense the smell of snow in the air now. You'll be fortunate to have 12 more hours before the storm descends. And here is a piece of information often omitted from history texts. These men had to provide shelter for more than just themselves. Your horses are tied nearby, their nervousness growing as the wind intensifies. To lose your horse to the cold would be a self-inflicted death sentence. A horse was your mobility, your means of transporting furs and traps, and, in many situations, your only chance of escaping hostile encounters or predators. A seasoned trapper, as one account from the 1840s noted, always builds a shelter for his horse before his own. A trapper who has perished still has his horse. A living trapper who has lost his horse is soon to be a dead one. The next task is to delimb the felled tree, removing every branch to create a clean, smooth trunk. Your axe sinks into the smaller branches, while the larger ones demand more cautious cuts to prevent the axe from getting stuck. Every movement must be efficient and exact. Expending unnecessary energy is a fatal mistake when you are burning thousands of calories each day simply to stay alive. The sun arcs higher in the sky, but its warmth is deceptive and fleeting. The wind is gaining strength, carrying the first delicate snowflakes. You increase your pace, stripping the tree to a bare log before proceeding to the next marked pine. By noon, your hands are raw. Blood begins to seep from the fresh blisters, rendering the axe handle slippery and making your grip even more agonizing. Yet you cannot stop, you must not stop. 3 trees are now on the ground, their enormous trunks arranged in parallel within the clearing. During my own historical research, I came across the writings of a mountain man named James Clyman, who described his hands bleeding so profusely that the notches he cut in the logs filled with his own blood. He wrote that by the time night arrived, he had lost all sensation in his fingers, but he continued to swing. The only other option was to prepare a shallow grave that would be revealed in the spring. Your stomach protests, a stark reminder that you have not eaten since before dawn. You allow yourself only a brief pause to chew a piece of jerky and to drink from the spring nearby. The water is so intensely cold that it makes your teeth ache, yet it provides enough refreshment to carry on. The next tree is even larger, with a diameter of nearly 2 feet. You walk around it, assessing the best angle of attack. Then you resume your work. Your muscles have settled into a familiar rhythm, and despite the discomfort, each swing lands with practiced accuracy. But then, halfway through the task, disaster occurs. The head of the axe, worked loose by thousands of powerful impacts, suddenly detaches from the handle, sailing through the air and disappearing into the undergrowth several feet away. Well, that's it, you say under your breath, looking at the now useless wooden handle in your hand. This is a moment where people from the modern world have no real frame of reference for true adversity. In our time, you would simply drive to a hardware store. In this world, this event could be a death sentence. Your heart pounds in your chest as you frantically scan the forest floor. To lose your axe at this critical juncture would be an absolute catastrophe. You fall to your hands and knees, desperately clearing away leaves and small branches until you see the dull shine of metal in the subdued light. A wave of relief washes over you, but it is fleeting. You must now reattach the head, and you must do it quickly. From your possibles bag, you retrieve a small, coiled strip of rawhide you have been saving. You immerse it in water from your canteen to make it supple. Then you begin the repair. First, you meticulously carve and reshape the end of the handle so it fits snugly back into the axe head. Next, you force the two pieces together and then wrap the wet rawhide tightly around the joint. As this rawhide strip dries, it will contract and tighten, forming a bond that is almost as strong as forged iron. During the time you wait for it to set, you use your knife to continue the work of delimbing the fallen trees. The work is slower and far more painstaking, but you cannot spare a single moment. I had the opportunity to speak with a historical reenactor who is an expert in the skills of the mountain man. He explained to me, these men were not merely survivors, they were elite problem solvers. They had to be an engineer, an architect, a doctor, a hunter, a weatherman, and a warrior all in one person, and they had to accomplish everything with perhaps 10 tools in total. After an hour has passed, the rawhide has dried sufficiently for you to carefully resume your work with the axe. The head feels secure for the moment, but you will need to monitor it constantly. Your first few swings are cautious, but you soon find your previous rhythm. The day slowly progresses. 4 trees down, then 5, then 6. Your shadow grows long across the clearing as the sun begins to sink behind the mountains. The temperature is falling sharply now, and the snowflakes are becoming larger and more frequent. Your body has reached its physical breaking point. Every single muscle is screaming for relief. Blood has seeped through your buckskin gloves, and your vision is blurry with fatigue. But the simple shelter of pine boughs from the previous night will not be enough to see you through the coming storm. You raise your eyes to the darkening sky. Just grant me until morning, you murmur, though to whom you are speaking is unclear. Perhaps it is to a higher power, or perhaps just to the mountains themselves. With 7 large pine trees felled and delimbed, you now have enough material to begin the actual construction of the cabin. There will be more trees to cut tomorrow, but the labor of today has given you a real chance at survival. As the darkness deepens, you build up the fire and make yourself eat more jerky, though your exhaustion has suppressed your appetite. You are aware that you will need every single calorie for the work that awaits you tomorrow. The wind wails through the trees as the snow begins to fall with greater intensity. You pull your blanket tightly around yourself, keeping your axe within easy reach as you lie down by the fire. Sleep finds you almost immediately as your body gives in to its profound exhaustion. Yet, even in your slumber, your mind continues to work, mapping out the next day's tasks, calculating the necessary materials, planning how to notch the logs, how to raise the walls, and how to construct the roof. In this world, even your dreams must be pragmatic if you hope to see the next sunrise. In contrast to your comfortable bed in the present, with its soft mattress and warm blankets, your sleep here is shallow and vigilant, ready to be broken by any unfamiliar sound. The cry of a mountain lion, the howl of a wolf, or even worse, the nearly silent tread of a grizzly bear drawn by the human scent. It is at this point that we will pause our story for the night. Tomorrow, we will discover if our mountain man can successfully raise the walls of his cabin before the storm unleashes its full power. But for this moment, let the gentle pressure of your own blankets be a reminder of how far removed we are from those desperate times when a simple shelter was the only thing standing between a person and their demise. As you drift closer to sleep, just try to imagine what it would feel like to know that your continued existence depended entirely on what you could create with your own two hands before the storm arrived. Something is not right. Your eyes fly open into a world of absolute blackness. For a brief, disorienting second, you cannot remember where you are. Then, the reality of your situation returns in a sudden rush. The clearing, the felled logs, the approaching storm. The fire has gone out. That is what woke you. An intense cold has invaded your space, seeping through your wool blanket and settling deep within your bones. You force yourself to sit up, and every muscle protests the movement. Your hands are so rigid with cold that you can barely flex them. The blisters have become frozen scabs that crack and bleed with the simple motion of your fingers. A layer of snow covers the ground around you, not the light dusting of the previous evening, but a solid 3 inches. It accumulated in silence while you were asleep, a white veil draped over everything. Your breath materializes before you, a cloud of frozen vapor that hangs in the still morning air before slowly dissipating. You look to the eastern horizon. There is no sign of dawn yet, but you do not have the luxury of waiting for the sun. Every moment of daylight is now invaluable. I once read the account of a trapper named William Anderson who described a similar awakening. His beard had frozen solid to his blanket, and when he tore it free, it took a patch of his whiskers with it. He wrote that his own saliva froze into a pellet of ice before it could even strike the ground. He knew with certainty that if he did not get moving, he would be as frozen and rigid as a plank of wood by sunrise. With pained, aching fingers, you carefully sift through the ashes of last night's fire, hoping to find a single living coal. There it is, a faint orange glow buried deep beneath the white ash. You carefully place your small supply of tinder, cedar bark kept dry inside your shirt, over the ember and begin to blow with a soft, steady rhythm, coaxing it back to life. A spark ignites a thin wisp of smoke rising from the tinder. You methodically add tiny twigs, then slightly larger ones, gradually building the fire. In this environment, fire is not just a source of comfort. It is life itself. As the flames grow stronger, you get to your feet and stamp them, trying to restore circulation to your numb toes. Every joint in your body feels as if it is filled with sharp fragments of glass. But you are still alive. And as long as you are alive, you can continue to build. While the fire gains strength, you take stock of your provisions. The jerky is almost gone. With careful rationing, it might last another 2 days. Your gunpowder, thankfully, is still dry, protected within its oiled cloth wrapper. The axe head remains securely fastened to its handle. These are small triumphs. You wisely slept with your boots on to prevent them from freezing into solid blocks of leather. That was a smart decision, as wet leather freezes harder than stone, and you cannot work with feet that feel like blocks of ice. You consume a single strip of jerky and take a drink from your canteen, where the water has turned into a thick, icy slush. The forest is unnaturally silent. Its sounds muffled by the blanket of new snow. You can almost hear the beating of your own heart. This is the kind of profound silence that can lead a person to start talking to themselves after months of solitude. All right, you say aloud, your voice sounding foreign after so many days without use. Time to get to work. There was an old saying among the mountain men. From dawn until dusk, you swing that axe, or by springtime, a bear will be standing on your grave. It was not elegant poetry, but it effectively conveyed the urgency. The snow has added a new layer of difficulty to your tasks. You will need to clear it from the fallen logs before you can begin to work on them. And felling more trees will now require you to trudge through the deep snow to find suitable ones. But you must address the most immediate task first. You need to begin processing the logs you have already felled. Yesterday was a day of quantity, of getting enough raw material on the ground. Today is a day of precision, of transforming those raw logs into the essential components of a cabin that will preserve your life. Using your knife, you clear a patch of snow and then, with a piece of charred wood, you sketch a simple design in the dirt. The cabin will be modest, approximately 10 by 12 feet, just large enough for a sleeping area, a fireplace, and some room to move. A larger structure would be impossible to keep warm. As the first faint, gray light of dawn begins to filter through the trees, you collect your tools and approach the first log. In an ideal world, you would allow these logs to cure for several months, but the approaching winter makes that impossible. You will have to build with green, unseasoned wood and contend with the subsequent shrinkage. The first step is to remove all of the bark. Bark retains moisture and is an attractant for insects. It must be removed. You take your axe and begin the process of stripping the log, moving from one end to the other. The bark peels away in large, satisfying sections, exposing the pale, new wood underneath. I once had the chance to try this at a living history exhibit in Colorado. The historian on site explained, "Most people have no idea that debarking a single log can take many hours. These mountain men would dedicate entire days just to preparing logs before the actual construction could even begin. The task is repetitive but has a certain rhythm. As you fall into the familiar pattern of swing, scrape, and move, your muscles begin to warm, and the sharp pain subsides into a persistent, dull ache. The sun finally clears the eastern peaks, casting long golden shafts of light through the forest. The snow sparkles as if it were strewn with countless diamonds. For a brief second, the sheer beauty of the scene is breathtaking. Then, a sudden gust of wind penetrates your buckskin clothing, reminding you that in this place, beauty is often just a mask for the ever-present threat of death. By mid-morning, you have successfully debarked 3 of the logs. Your stomach is growling again, but you push the feeling aside. There is no time for a proper meal now. You chew on another piece of jerky as you work, the tough, dried meat slowly softening in your mouth. Now you face the most difficult part of the process. Notching. The corners of your cabin must be joined by precisely crafted notches that will interlock the logs securely. If you make a mistake here, the walls will be unstable, riddled with gaps that will allow the wind and snow to penetrate. You have seen enough cabins to understand the fundamental technique known as the saddle notch. It is the most straightforward and efficient method for someone working alone. You will carve a rounded channel near the end of each log, shaped to perfectly cradle the log that will be placed on top of it. Accurate measurement is absolutely essential. You walk the perimeter of your planned cabin again, using stakes to mark the corners. Then you carefully drag the first of the debarked logs into position to serve as the base of the north wall. Marking the locations for the notches requires careful thought. You lay your axe handle horizontally across the log, using it as a guide to mark where the cuts must be made. You will need 2 notches, one at each end, to join with the logs for the east and west walls. Using your axe, you make a series of parallel cuts at the marked spot, each about 4 inches apart and 6 inches deep. Next, you carefully chop away the wood between these cuts, creating a rough channel. This first notch is not a work of art, but it does not need to be. It only needs to provide a secure seat for the next log. The sun continues its ascent, melting some of the snow. Your back is slick with sweat despite the cold, and you take occasional breaks to drink from the spring. The work is methodical and demanding. Each notch demands at least 20 minutes of meticulous chopping. Allow me to paint a more vivid picture for you of this moment. You are standing in a small clearing, encircled by towering pine trees. In the distance, the mountains rise like immense, blue sentinels. The fresh snow blankets everything in sight, except for the area around your fire and the places where you have been working. The vapor of your breath forms a cloud in the cold air. Your hands are raw, and they leave faint streaks of blood on the pale wood. Every few minutes, you pause your work to wipe the sweat from your eyes with a sleeve that is already stiff with frozen perspiration. A hawk soars high above, riding the thermal updrafts, perhaps contemplating this unusual, two-legged creature below. The only sounds are the rhythmic bite of your axe into wood, your own labored breathing, and the infrequent, distant howl of a wolf. This is the true meaning of solitude. It is not an hour of disconnection from your phone. It is a state of complete separation from all of humanity. It is just you, the mountains, and the certain knowledge that if you fail, your body will never be found. By noon, you have successfully positioned and notched all 4 of the base logs. The foundation of your cabin is beginning to materialize. It is a simple rectangle outlined on the snowy ground, but this is only the very beginning. You need to fell more trees. The 7 you brought down yesterday are far from sufficient. Assessing your progress, you calculate that you will need a minimum of 15 additional logs for the walls, and even more for the roof. You set off through the snow, axe resting on your shoulder, in search of the right trees. Not just any tree is suitable. You require straight trees with minimal tapering, ideally with a diameter of about 1 foot. Pine trees are preferable due to their straight grain and natural resistance to decay. I once consulted with a forestry expert who had studied the cabins constructed by mountain men, and he explained that these men were remarkably discerning. They could survey a stand of 100 trees and instantly pick out the 5 that were worth the effort of felling. They were more than just loggers. They were true artisans with an intimate understanding of their materials. You identify a perfect candidate, a lodgepole pine, about 14 inches in diameter at its base, straight as an arrow, with very few branches on its lower trunk. You examine the surrounding area to ensure a clear path for it to fall. Then you begin to chop. Your technique is already more refined than it was yesterday. You cut the main notch on the falling side more efficiently now, angling your cuts to form a precise wedge. Then you move to the back side of the tree to make a slightly higher horizontal cut. The tree begins to make a creaking sound. You step away, your eyes fixed on its top, watching for any indication of movement. There is a moment of absolute silence, which is then broken by a sharp crack. The pine tree starts its descent, gaining momentum, its branches making a sound like tearing cloth as they rush through the air. It lands exactly where you planned, crashing through smaller trees in its way before coming to a final rest with a ground-shaking impact that sends a cloud of snow into the air. One more down, but there are many more to go. The day falls into a predictable pattern. Fell de limb, debark, and repeat. Your body operates on instinct while your mind is free to wander. You think of the warmth of the trading posts down on the Missouri River, with their roaring fires and casks of whiskey. You think of St. Louis, with its constant activity, its noise, and its women in their fine calico dresses. It all feels like a distant dream now. I discovered a letter written by a mountain man to his sister in the East. He wrote, Sometimes I wonder if the towns even exist anymore, or if they have all just disappeared like the morning mist. The wilderness has a way of making civilization feel like a story that someone told you a long time ago. By mid-afternoon, you have added 3 more trees to your growing collection. Your hands have moved past the point of pain and now feel a strange, numb detachment. The blood has soaked through your gloves, making the handle of your axe sticky. You have ceased to notice the cold, except for when the wind blows in strong gusts. The sky is growing dark once more, not just with the coming of evening, but with the approach of more weather. The storm is gathering strength, with layers of heavy clouds advancing from the northwest. You might have just one more day before it arrives with its full intensity. You redirect your efforts to the cabin site. With the 4 base logs now in place, you must begin to build the walls upward. This is where the task becomes truly challenging. Lifting the heavy logs into place by yourself is an incredibly strenuous undertaking. To get the next layer of logs up, you construct a makeshift ramp from smaller logs, creating a gentle incline to the top of the base logs. Then, you painstakingly roll the next log up this ramp, using your shoulder as the primary source of leverage. The first attempt almost ends in disaster. Halfway up the ramp, the log suddenly shifts, nearly rolling back on top of you. You jump out of the way just in time, watching as it crashes back to the ground, partially destroying your ramp. Son of a... You snarl, kicking at the snow in your frustration. I read a trapper's account that described this very same problem. He wrote, "Raising logs alone is a dance with death. One small slip and 2,000 pounds of pine will snap your spine like a twig. I saw a man near Fort Hall crushed flat when his log rolled. We buried what was left of him in a shallow grave and then divided his possessions. That was the justice of the frontier. You rebuild the ramp, making it less steep this time, and you try again. Now, you use a rope looped around the log to provide better control as you roll it up. The progress is excruciatingly slow, but the log eventually reaches the top of the ramp and settles securely into the notches of the base logs. Success. One wall is now 2 logs high. The remainder of the afternoon is a blur of sweat and physical exertion. You succeed in raising 1 more log on each of the 4 walls before the darkness starts to descend. The temperature plummets with the setting sun, and the wind intensifies, driving sharp, icy needles of snow against your face. Your fingers are numb, claw-like appendages, and your lips are cracked and bleeding from the cold and dehydration. When you finally stop for the day, your legs are so weak they nearly give way beneath you. The cabin is beginning to take shape. It is a rectangle of logs, now 2 logs high, the nascent form of what will be your refuge against the coming winter. But it is far from being finished. At your current rate of progress, you estimate that it will take at least 3 more days of work before it is even minimally inhabitable. The question is whether the storm will grant you that much time. You collect firewood, gathering armfuls of branches from the trees you have felled, and you build your fire into a roaring blaze. Tonight will be even colder than the last, and you will need all the warmth you can generate. Seated by the fire, you remove your gloves to inspect your hands. They are a wreck, covered in blisters, some of which have broken and are weeping, while others are swollen with fluid. Your palms are crisscrossed with cuts from the bark and with splinters. You pour a small amount of your precious water over them to clean away the blood and dirt. Then you hold them close to the flames, welcoming the sharp, stinging pain that signifies the return of feeling. Your muscles are trembling with exhaustion, and a deep hunger gnaws at your belly. You force yourself to eat with restraint. You consume just enough jerky to maintain your strength. Once that supply is exhausted, you will have to hunt, but that is a challenge for another day. As darkness completely envelopes the forest, you wrap yourself in your blanket and lie down next to the fire. The day's labor has left you too exhausted to be concerned with comfort. Sleep comes almost instantly, pulling you down into the darkness. But even in your sleep, your mind continues its work, solving problems and planning the next day's labor. How to raise the walls even higher, how to form the gable ends, how to construct a roof that will not collapse under the weight of the snow. Because in this world, even your dreams must serve a practical purpose. The mountains are indifferent to your hopes and your fears. They only offer respect for preparation and for relentless effort. And as you sink deeper into sleep, the snow begins to fall once more, silent and continuous, covering your felled logs, your tools, and the entire clearing in a fresh white blanket. Unlike the warm bed you are in now, with its soft pillows and controlled temperature, your sleep here is fitful, only half restful. One ear remains attuned to the sound of approaching danger. One hand is never far from your rifle. But for this moment, you have endured another day. In the wilderness that in itself is a victory. The wall of logs is starting to rise, a monument to human persistence against the indifferent power of nature. Tomorrow will present new difficulties, the most challenging part of the entire construction. But for now, you must rest. You must gather your strength. The cabin that will stand between you and your demise is slowly taking form, one grueling log at a time. A sound awakens you. It is not the wind, nor is it an animal. It is something else. You remain perfectly still, your eyes closed, listening intently. There it is again. The unmistakable crunch of snow beneath a moccasin. Someone is approaching your camp. Your hand instinctively moves to your rifle, your fingers closing around the cold metal of the barrel. In this place, visitors are seldom a welcome sight. It could be Blackfoot warriors who have been responsible for the deaths of many trappers in these mountains. It could be claim jumpers looking to steal the few possessions you have. It could even be a rogue grizzly bear, although they should be in their dens by this time of year. The footsteps stop, Then, a voice calls out to you. It is rough but undeniably human. Hello, the camp, coming in friendly. You sit up slowly, your rifle at the ready but not pointed directly at them. Show yourself. Two figures step out from the edge of the trees, their breath visible as clouds in the cold morning air. They are men dressed in buckskins, and each carries a rifle and an axe. They are trappers by the looks of them. One is tall and slender, with a graying beard that extends to his chest. The other is shorter and more powerfully built, with a face so weathered it appears to have been carved from the mountains themselves. Name's Fitzgerald, the tall one says. This here is Cooper. We saw your smoke yesterday evening. Thought we'd check to see if you were alive or dead. I have read numerous trapper journals, and this scenario was more common than one might imagine. In the vast emptiness of the wilderness, trappers would occasionally seek each other out, particularly as winter approached. There was safety in numbers, an opportunity to share skills, and, in all honesty, probably just the need to hear another human voice after months of profound isolation. You lower your rifle slightly but keep it within easy reach. Trust is a commodity that is earned slowly in the mountains. What brings you boys this far up? Cooper spits a stream of tobacco juice onto the snow. Beaver Creek down yonder is lousy with them, he says. But that storm coming in ain't no joke. We saw you were building. Figured maybe we could lend a hand. Make it go faster. You observe them closely. Their equipment is worn but has been well maintained. They show no signs of the kind of desperation that can make a man dangerous. And to be perfectly honest, you could certainly use their assistance. Coffee is ready if you want some, you say, gesturing toward your small fire. It is the closest thing to a formal welcome you are prepared to offer. It's amusing, really. I discovered a letter in a historical archive in which a mountain man described a similar encounter to his brother. He wrote, "Met two fellows building a cabin near the Yellowstone. We helped them raise their walls in exchange for coffee and conversation. Neither of us mentioned how we nearly shot each other at first light. Some things just don't need to be said out here." Fitzgerald and Cooper settled down by your fire, accepting the tin cups of black coffee you provide. The liquid is bitter and strong, having been boiled several times from the same coffee grounds, but it is hot. In this environment, that is a luxury. As the dawn fully breaks, you take a closer look at your new companions. Both men have the hard, lean appearance of those who have endured multiple winters in the high country. Their buckskin clothing is patched and stained. Their faces are wind-chapped and etched with deep lines, but their eyes are clear and watchful. The eyes of men who have learned to perceive danger before it perceives them. "That's a good start you've got there," Fitzgerald remarks, nodding in the direction of your half-finished cabin. "But them walls need to be higher before that storm hits proper," he adds. Cooper grunts his assent. "Reckon we can get it done today if we all pitch in." You are not a person who trusts easily, but the instinct for survival overrides your suspicion. And 3 men can certainly accomplish in a single day what would take you 3 days to do on your own. Got tools for all of us? You ask. Cooper pats the axe hanging from his belt. Never go anywhere without old Betsy here. Fitzgerald stretches his long frame and rises to his feet. Let's get to it then. Daylight's burning. I once interviewed an expert on frontier cooperation at the Wyoming Historical Society, and she explained that these kinds of temporary alliances were essential for survival. Men who might otherwise be rivals for trapping territory would join forces to build cabins, to hunt, or to defend against common threats. Then, they would go their separate ways, sometimes without ever having learned each other's real names. With the assistance of Fitzgerald and Cooper, the work adopts a new, more efficient rhythm. Fitzgerald, it becomes clear, has constructed more than a few cabins in his time. He demonstrates a superior notching technique which he refers to as the saddle notch. See, you don't want to cut straight across, he explains, illustrating the method with his axe. You want to round it like this, so the log above sits snug, keeps the wind out better. His method creates a curved recess at the end of each log, perfectly contoured to cradle the crossing log. It is a simple but highly effective technique, the kind of practical knowledge that can only be acquired through direct experience. Cooper, meanwhile, proves to be an expert at raising logs with his stocky, powerful frame. He improvises a lever system, using smaller logs as fulcrums to lift the heavy pine trunks into position. Learned this from the Frenchies down on the Mississippi, he says, grunting as he puts his weight on the lever, raising a log that would have taken you hours to move. Work smarter, not harder. The morning is a blur of coordinated activity. Logs that would have taken you an entire day to raise are now being placed every hour. The walls climb steadily, 3 logs high, then 4. You planning a fireplace? Fitzgerald asks during a short break for water. East wall, you reply, pointing. Figured I'd use those rocks from the creek bed. He nods his approval. Smart. We should leave the opening now, save you having to cut it later. You had been so intensely focused on just getting the walls up that you had not considered that far ahead. But he is correct. It is far easier to build around a fireplace opening than it is to cut through a completed wall. Here is a fascinating historical detail. During an archaeological excavation of an 1830s trapper cabin in Wyoming, the foundation of the fireplace was found to contain buffalo bones and elk antlers mixed in with the stones. The trapper had simply utilized whatever materials were at hand. That is a perfect example of frontier resourcefulness. By midday, the 3 of you have established a seamless workflow. Cooper fells and limbs the trees. You handle the debarking and the initial rough notching, and Fitzgerald performs the final, precise notching and directs the placement of the logs. The cabin walls now stand 5 logs high, taller than a man. The sky has grown even darker, and the wind now carries the distinct scent of snow. Large, heavy snowflakes begin to fall, slowly at first, and then with increasing steadiness. She's coming on faster than I figured, Cooper observes, glancing at the sky with a concerned expression. Fitzgerald nods grimly. We've got maybe 5 hours of daylight left. We need to get these walls up to their full height and start on the roof, or all this work will have been for nothing. The mention of a roof introduces a new set of challenges. You have been so concentrated on the walls that you have not yet fully formulated a plan for the roof structure. Constructing a proper pitched roof requires rafters, beams, and more intricate notching than the walls. Ever built a roof before? Fitzgerald asks, as if he can read your thoughts. You shake your head. First cabin. He spits into the snow. Well, you picked a hell of a time to learn, but we'll get you squared away. As the afternoon progresses, the snowfall becomes more intense. You continue to work through it, ignoring the wet and the cold. Your hands, already raw from days of labor, begin to bleed again, but you hardly notice. There is only the work. The next log, the next notch, the next section of wall. Cooper pauses to chew on another piece of tobacco, critically assessing the walls. Going to need a ridge beam, something solid, and rafters coming down from it. Fitzgerald indicates a tall, straight pine tree at the edge of the clearing. That one there would make a good ridge beam. It needs to be longer than the cabin. The three of you set to work on the designated tree, a massive pine nearly 2 feet in diameter at its base, with Cooper and Fitzgerald working in tandem on opposite sides. The tree comes down in a matter of minutes, rather than the hour it would have taken you on your own. Now for the tricky part, Fitzgerald says, wiping the sweat from his brow despite the cold. We need to get this big bastard up on top of them walls. I once spent a week with a historical reconstruction team in Montana, and they showed me how mountain men would have solved this very problem. The expert explained to me that without cranes or pulleys, they relied on pure physics and muscle. They would construct what is known as a dead man, which is essentially a log buried perpendicular to the cabin to serve as an anchor point for ropes and levers. It was an exceedingly dangerous method. Cooper studies the site and then points to a spot about 20 feet from the cabin. We'll dig a hole there, bury a log halfway as an anchor, and use ropes to guide the ridge beam up while we push from below. It is a brilliant solution, though it is extremely labor-intensive. The three of you spend the next hour digging through the frozen ground to create the anchor point and then setting up the lifting apparatus. This ground is harder than a heart. Cooper grunts as his axe bounces off the frozen earth. Your experience with hearts is extensive. I take it, Fitzgerald responds dryly. Cooper gives him a sharp look and then laughs, a rough, rusty sound, as if he does not use it often. More so than yours, you skinny bastard. This rough banter serves as a reminder of something you have been missing during your time alone: human connection. Even this crude form of joking feels like a comfort to the soul after weeks of silence. With the anchor in place, you begin the perilous task of raising the ridge beam. Cooper and Fitzgerald have crafted a crude rope from strips of rawhide, looping it around the heavy log. You take your position at the bottom end, ready to push upward while they manage the descent from the anchor point. On 3, Fitzgerald calls out. 1, 2, 3. You heave with all of your strength, your muscles screaming in protest as the massive log begins to rise. Inch by excruciating inch, the ridge beam ascends. Your focus narrows to this single task, this single moment. Nothing else exists but the burning sensation in your shoulders and back, the rough texture of the bark under your palms, and the desperate need to keep the log moving upward. Steady, Cooper shouts as the beam begins to waver slightly. Don't let it roll. A log of this size, if it were to roll now, would crush anyone in its path. The thought sends a new surge of strength through your exhausted body. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the ridge beam reaches the top of the walls. With careful coordination, the 3 of you guide it into position along the central axis of the cabin. Hold it there, Fitzgerald calls, scrambling up the walls with an agility that is surprising for a man of his age. He quickly secures the beam in place with more strips of rawhide, lashing it temporarily until it can be properly notched and set. The sky is growing darker, both from the approaching evening and from the intensifying storm. The snow is now falling steadily, accumulating on your shoulders and head as you work. We need to get them rafters up before it's fully dark, Cooper says, already moving to cut the smaller logs that will form the framework of the roof. You have never worked so hard or so fast in your entire life. Under Fitzgerald's direction, you and Cooper cut and position the rafters logs about 6 inches in diameter that extend from the ridge beam down to the top of the walls at an angle, creating the pitched roof structure. Each rafter must be notched at both ends, at the ridge beam and at the top of the wall, to prevent it from sliding. This precise work is made even more challenging by the fading light and the worsening weather. I once asked a historian how these men managed to work in such conditions. He told me that they did not have the luxury of waiting for favorable weather. If a storm was approaching and you did not have shelter, you worked through the snow, the sleet, or whatever else came. The men who were unable or unwilling to do so simply did not survive to share their stories. As darkness begins to fall in earnest, you have the basic roof structure in place, the ridge beam and the rafters forming a sturdy frame. It is not yet complete. You still need to add cross pieces and some form of covering, but it is substantial enough that you can finish it tomorrow, even in heavy snow. That'll hold for tonight, Fitzgerald says, surveying your work with evident satisfaction. It still needs a proper covering, but it'll keep the worst of the snow off. Cooper has already started a fire on the cabin's dirt floor. Without a proper chimney yet, smoke fills the upper part of the space, but it is far better than being fully exposed to the elements. It might get a bit smoky, he admits, but it's better than freezing solid. The three of you huddle together inside the half-finished structure, passing around a flask of whiskey that Cooper produces from within his buckskins. The amber liquid burns as it goes down, but it spreads a welcome warmth through your exhausted body. Not bad for a day's work, Fitzgerald says, looking up at the roof framework, which is silhouetted against the darkening sky. Snow drifts down between the rafters, melting in the heat from the fire. It would have taken me days on my own, you admit, taking another small sip of whiskey before passing the flask back. Cooper shrugs. A man alone out here is just waiting to die. It ain't natural. There is a profound truth in his words. Humans are social creatures, even the most fiercely independent of mountain men. Complete isolation for an extended period can wear down even the most resilient spirit. I read a fascinating letter from a trapper to his wife back east. He wrote, "Today, 3 strangers helped me build my winter cabin. Tomorrow they will be gone, and I may never see them again. But for one day, I remembered what it was to be a part of mankind, not just a solitary animal in these mountains. As night fully descends, the storm intensifies. The wind howls through the incomplete roof, but the walls effectively block the worst of it. The fire casts dancing shadows on the log walls, and for the first time in weeks, you feel something that resembles a sense of safety. You got a name?" Fitzgerald asks finally, breaking a long silence. "Well, your name," he says. "You picked a hell of a spot for your first cabin. Good water, good timber, decent protection from the north wind. You might just make it through the winter. Coming from a veteran mountain man, this is high praise." Cooper has produced some dried venison, which is tougher and darker than your jerky. He cuts 3 roughly equal pieces with his knife and passes them around. It is like chewing on leather, but it is food that you did not have to provide for yourself, which somehow makes it taste better. "The storm will blow itself out in a day or 2, he says between bites. "We'll get that roof properly covered tomorrow. Maybe start on your fireplace if there's time." "Why are you helping me?" The question escapes you before you can stop it. Fitzgerald and Cooper exchange a look. It is Cooper who provides the answer. "Same reason anyone does anything out here. Self-interest." He takes another bite of venison. "Next time, it might be us who needs help. That's the way it works." Fitzgerald nods. "Mountain law. Today you, tomorrow me. It's as simple and as complicated as that. Out here, where death is always just one mistake away, cooperation is not an act of charity. It is a form of insurance." The fire crackles, sending sparks upward toward the open rafters. Outside, the world has vanished into a swirling white void of snow and darkness. But within these four walls, walls that you built with your own hands, there is warmth, food, and, for tonight at least, companionship. You realize that your hands have stopped bleeding. The constant labor has finally created calluses thick enough that the splits and blisters are beginning to heal. It is another small victory. As exhaustion pulls you towards sleep, you look around at what you have accomplished. Just days ago, these logs were living trees. Now, they form the beginning of a home, a fortress against the brutal winter that lies ahead.